All right, man, peace. You know, brothers, I remember the first time familiarizing myself with Mr. Julian Edelman, particularly in the aftermath of the Patriots deciding that they were no longer going to utilize the services of Mr. Wes Welker. I watched Julian Edelman and I said to myself, damn, this dude can really play. And they only used him part-time, of course, as a wide receiver. But as he started to get more and more reps, he made a bigger and bigger impact on his team. And I remember having a very detailed conversation with a cat that I was working with at the time, just prior to the Patriots Super Bowl against the Seahawks. And I remember telling him, watch out for Edelman. He's going to be one of the biggest players in that game. And of course he was. There was the very memorable catch that Julian Edelman had where Cam Chancellor tried to knock him out, and he ended up damn near knocking himself out. And then, if I remember correctly, Edelman had the go-ahead touchdown in that game. So he's constantly shown over the last 5 years that he is a big play wide receiver in big games. Is he Antonio Brown? No. Is he Odell Beckham? No. Is he AJ Green? No. Is he DeAndre Hopkins? No. He's none of those guys. But he's a player that you know is going to show up when you need him. He's never going to drop a big pass. And that's why I put him above Wes Welker, even though Wes Welker has far better numbers. In my view, Julian Edelman is a discernibly better player than Wes Welker. So did he deserve to win the MVP in the Super Bowl on Sunday night? No, not quite. Even though I don't have a big problem with him getting the award, I knew he was going to get the award because he had a whole bunch of catches for a whole bunch of yards. I thought that Stephon Gilmore deserved the award because of the impact that he had, being able to go toe-to-toe with Brandon Cooks, even though Cooks had a good game. Whenever a great wide receiver gets that many targets and the corner is able to, to get an interception, to have multiple breakups, things of that nature, the corner really won the day because the wide receiver knows where he's supposed to run to and he knows where the football is supposed to be. The cornerback does not. And then they held one of the top offenses in the league this year to only 3 points. So I thought that Gilmore deserved the MVP, but I had no big problem with Edelman getting the award. So anyway, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
You're always used to the haters when you play for New England, so you don't even really think about it. It's all noise.
Well, I think
haters, period, are only all noise.
Well, I think it probably inspires you just a little bit. Knowing your personality, just a little bit, Julian. Come on.
And let me say this, man. It's a very small world. I recently found out, maybe a couple days ago, that this dude, Julian Edelman, who's right behind Jerry Rice in playoff catches and yards and all that other stuff, used to date Jerry Rice's daughter when he was a kid. I said, what type of shit is this? And you know what's so funny about that whole situation with Jerry Rice's daughter? I believe her name is Jada Rice. She kind of gets around in the NFL circles. Now, she dated, quote unquote, dated Julian Edelman when they were kids. They were like in junior high school, whatever. But she also dated the current tight end of the Atlanta Falcons, who also happens to be a so-called white boy by the name of Austin Hooper. Now, Austin Hooper not only used to whoop her ass, but he used to tell her, I don't give a shit who your dad is. I'll do the same thing to your dad. Something along those lines, he said. You could look that up, though. Now she's dating a defensive tackle from the Seattle Seahawks, who happens to be a so-called black man. I think his name is Liggins, something like that. And supposedly he whooped her ass too. So maybe either she has bad luck or she's one of these chicks that loves confrontation. Either way, the world is very, very small. Who would have thought that Julian Edelman, who's second to Jerry Rice in all of these playoff receiving records, used to date Jerry Rice's daughter? And Julian Edelman will tell you himself that he was so scared of Jerry Rice when he would go to their house when he was a little kid, because he'd be in the backyard playing basketball with Jerry Rice's daughter, and Jerry Rice would come out with just a gold chain on and just scare the hell out of him.
It was definitely nice to win today.
And it was nice to have 8 receiving first downs last night en route to taking home the MVP trophy. Jerry Rice is the only player in Super Bowl history to have more first down catches in a game. Rice had...
Of course, because Jerry Rice is the best player in the history of the NFL.
Rice had 9 catches for a first down on 2 separate occasions, Super Bowl 23 and Super Bowl 29. Now, let's get you back to First Take.
And there's kind of, I won't call it a groundswell, but there are rumblings from different factions saying, should Julian Edelman be an NFL Hall of Famer? The answer, of course, is no. He's not an NFL Hall of Famer. He's a Patriots Hall of Famer. But if you're going to start to consider Julian Edelman, then we have to go back into history and start to consider other great players from great teams who are not Hall of Fame caliber because of their numbers, but because of their impact for a championship team. If you're going to put Julian Edelman in the Hall of Fame, John Taylor has to be in the Hall of Fame. Brent Jones has to be in the Hall of Fame. Tom Rathman has to be in the Hall of Fame. Jay Novacek has to be in the Hall of Fame. None of those guys are going to the Hall of Fame, and neither should Julian Edelman.
Julian Edelman, 10 catches for 141 yards, accounting for the most offensive production among the Pats' weapons. Let's keep in mind he was suspended the first 4 games for PEDs. Damian Woody joining.
And let's be for real. If Julian Edelman is not taking PEDs, he can't compete in the NFL. He just can't.
Joining us now, Damian, good morning.
Good morning, good morning.
Stephen A., I'll start with you. Did you feel like Julian Edelman deserved Super Bowl MVP?
No. The MVP of that game should have went to Stephon Gilmore.
No, I didn't think anybody on the offensive side of the ball for the New England Patriots deserved MVP.
Agreed.
I thought you could have gone in 2 directions on the defensive side of the ball. You could have gone with Dante Hightower, had a couple of sacks, who was menacing throughout the afternoon. He had 2 of the Patriots' 4 sacks. You could go with Stephon Gilmore, who I believe intercepted that pass near the end of the game, and he was involved in a lot of different plays as well.
Absolutely. You know, Shannon Sharp, I believe it was, made a great point. He stated that he believed that the reason why no one on the Patriots defense was seriously considered to win the MVP of that game is because over the course of the regular season, the Patriots were not considered to have a great defense. And oftentimes in the history of the Super Bowl, when a defensive player wins the MVP award for the game, it's normally because their defense going into the game is held in such high esteem that the voters who decide who the MVP is going to be for that game are already looking at the defensive side. In the case of the Patriots, of course, they have not had a defensive player who truly stood out other than Gilmore over the course of this season, who I believe was rated the highest rated cornerback in the NFL. So one would think that they would have considered him, but because their defense was not held in such great esteem, it kind of took a little bit of shine off of what he was doing. And then on top of that, they really wanted to give the award to Tom Brady, but they said to themselves, we can't because he didn't have a passing touchdown. So let's just give it to the receiver who we threw it to the most.
I'm not going to lie to you. We're talking about Bill Belichick here. I think that in light of the hirings that we've seen in the National Football League, I think we should take a moment to give mass credit to Brian Flores.
What the hell happened there? What type of pass was that?
The linebackers coach, who also happens to be the defensive play caller for the New England Patriots. You played zone after going man. You loaded 6 in the box, okay? You sat up there and you schematically went about the business of outdueling Wade Phillips, who did a phenomenal job on the defensive side of the ball.
Yes, Wade Phillips was great. The Rams defense played exceptionally well, other than Aqib Talib, who I thought did not do as good a job on Edelman as I thought he would do.
For the Los Angeles Rams, as far as I'm concerned, with the exception of the last drive when they gave up 2 26-yard runs to Michelle and Burkett. So I look at it from the standpoint that you could go either route. You could look at but it's all on the defensive side of the ball for the New England Patriots. They are the MVPs of this Super Bowl. It ain't Tom Brady. It should not have been Julian Edelman. It should have been somebody on the defensive side of the ball, in my opinion, mainly Hightower for the New England Patriots, who should have won Super Bowl MVP.
The truth of the matter is you have to give the award to a player. Otherwise, really, the MVP was Bill Belichick.
So why bring that up if you already know that the MVP cannot be a coach, you idiot?
And I may have even broke with tradition there and actually given it to Belichick. That's how...
Well, we know that. You're the same guy who would have given LeBron James the MVP of the 2015 NBA Finals, even though they lost the series in 6 games.
How obvious, over the top it was that
Brian
Belichick
Flores
was the MVP of the game. What's that?
What about Brian
Brian
Flores?
Flores,
Who's about to be the head coach of Miami? You're the defensive play caller for the New England Patriots. How about that?
Listen, what we saw without Matt Patricia, what we saw without various defensive coordinators is Belichick doesn't need a defensive coordinator. It's obviously Bill Belichick, and he was the greatest defensive coordinator of all time when he was with the Giants, even before he ever got to New England. Look,
the defensive game plan that Bill Belichick came up with to stop the K-Gun Buffalo Bills offense, I believe, is in the Hall of Fame right now for Super Bowl 25.
that's the real answer. But if we must give it to a player, if we must identify one, then it is Julian Edelman. Yes, he was busted for PEDs. By the way, he was a TB12 guy, and he was busted for PEDs early in the season.
So, Max Kellerman, what are you trying to say? Are you trying to say that Tom Brady is on some shit?
And if this were baseball, he would not have been eligible to play in the championship game. However, this isn't, and no one seems to care in the NFL much about that stuff. And so he did play in the championship game. And furthermore...
Well, people care about it in the NFL. That's why you get suspended. The difference is that they don't penalize you for it in the long run like they do in baseball. The sport where they really don't care is basketball. We know that for a fact. We know they don't give a shit what you're taking in basketball.
PEDs at any point don't make you a clutch player. They can make you a better player, but not a clutch player. We've seen plenty of cheats who still choke under pressure. Julian Edelman is the definition of a clutch player. When you go for 141 yards in a game where every single yard is at a premium, in a game where in the first half the Rams' total offense was 57 yards, and one player goes for 141, that guy is the MVP of the game. It's like in a low...
Again, I did not have a problem with them giving Edelman the MVP, even though I would have given it to Gilmore. Edelman did stand out. Of all the offensive players on both sides, by far, he stood out the most.
Low scoring environment. That kind of offensive production has an outsized impact on the game. If you must choose a player, they got it right. It's Julian Edelman.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree that it was Julian Edelman. Stephen A., I totally understand where you're coming from. You look at that defensive game plan by the New England Patriots to be able to hold the second highest scoring team in the National Football League to 3 points. My God, I mean, what a game plan that Brian Flores, Bill Belichick put together.
And Stephen A., I have to say also, watching that game, it was enjoyable. It was quite enjoyable because I had a running gag going with my wife that every time a team punted, I get to eat a glazed honey bun. You know the type of honey bun that you cheap bastards never have on your show.
To stop that Rams team, the way they got after Jared Goff, you talking about a Patriots defense that only had 30 sacks, which is second fewest, and they got 4 sacks, and I don't know how many pressures on Jared Goff, but since
Well, the number one person who was pressuring Jared Goff was Jared Goff. Pressure is something that's self-created. Once again, I believe there's a Shannon Sharp quote: "Pressure is what you feel when you don't know what the hell you're doing."
Want to try to point for the MVP, you got to point to one player. It'll have to be Julian Edelman because, quite frankly, he was the only guy on the Patriots offense really doing anything. Whether it was zone or man that the Rams were playing against him, Julian Edelman was still finding ways to make plays for the Patriots offense.
He's definitely a playmaker.
I don't know how many times that he caught clutch play after play after play to keep the chains moving, or just big chunk plays for the New England Patriots. So, again, I wish I could pick a defensive player because that performance was quintessential New England Patriots and Belichick defensive coaching staff. But since we have to give it to one player, it's going to have to be Julian Edelman.
Well, let me tell you why I disagree with both of you, because the score was 3-3 at the end of 3 quarters. And when we look at it, basically what we're pointing to, I'm not trying to say that Edelman didn't play well. Please don't get me wrong. Yeah. But we're talking about the effectiveness. And at the end of the day, when you look at a 3-3 score, okay, let's say, for example, if the Rams had gotten it done, people might have, if that's the case, we might have been talking about Brandon Cooks, right?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, had Brandon Cooks caught that touchdown pass and they won the game, he had over 100 yards receiving even without that catch. He would have been the MVP of that game, or he would have been considered the MVP of that game.
Because he did have 120 receiving yards. But what dominated the majority of this game? It was defensive performances. Now, schematically, we look at the New England Patriots.
Marcus Peters had an exemplary game. I have to give him a lot of credit. And they pretty much followed the game plan that I laid out. They had Aqib Talib following around Julian Edelman for portions of the game. They had Marcus Peters on Chris Hogan, and they tried to shade their defense towards Gronk. That's what I stated they should do in my preview video. That's why I state that Aqib Talib kind of disappointed me a little bit with his coverage on Edelman.
and we see how they zoned up and how they emulated the Chicago Bears and what they did to the Los Angeles Rams when they played it earlier in the season. But I saw a guy, Dante Hightower, all over the field. Gilmore and the others, true, that was obviously the case. But they were applying pressure, and we look at them collectively and we say, this defense played absolutely lights out. They put forth a sensational performance, and as far as I'm concerned, Dante...
That's just terrible quarterback play. There's no way in the world that you should be outside the hash marks and then take a sack like that. Throw the football out of bounds, man.
Dante Hightower was the ringleader. I had the benefit of being able to sit in the booth next to Randy Moss and Chris Berman. Doesn't get much better than that. I'm here to tell you that right now. And if you're a guy listening to a guy like Randy Moss or what have you, who obviously knows his football just like Damian does, you can point to Dante Hightower missing out on dropping that interception. That's about the only thing he did wrong.
But you're missing
dropping the interception.
You're missing something important, I think, about Edelman. And look, people credit Tom Brady, and he deserves it. Tom Brady throughout the Super Bowl, and we'll get to that a little later, wasn't very good, but in the fourth quarter he was good. Like, he's game manager who's big on third down in the fourth quarter. Julian Edelman, look at championship teams across sports. They have guys like Julian Edelman. He's a clutch player.
Absolutely, I agree with that.
It's not just that he's good and that he's productive. He's at his best when you need him to be at his best.
But what about,
so you combine that with 140 yards, he's the MVP.
Right. Well, I guess what I'm saying to you, Max, is that I would lean on Calais Campbell, who's obviously a stout defensive player in the National Football League, and what he tweeted. He was pointing out how, you know what, these guys did this all game long. Certainly, if you're talking about an MVP moment, you can look at a couple of things. You can look at Brady connecting with Gronk for 18 yards. You can look at him hitting Burkhead for 7-yard games and nitpicking Sean McVay to death.
Right, but they didn't give the MVP award to Brady. So what's your point?
Before connecting on a 29-yard pass to Gronkowski, and you can justify giving Tom Brady the MVP based over that.
No, you could not.
Over that, or you can lean on the 10 receptions to Julian Edelman, who is exposing Roby, Akeem Talib, and others from time to time. But in terms of what was the dominant factor of the entire game, it was clearly their defense. Last time I checked, Dante Hightower can't go out there and catch receptions for first downs, move the chains, or catch touchdown passes. He plays defense. Last time I checked, it mattered. It certainly mattered in this lowest scoring Super Bowl in NFL history. And who was the ringleader for that?
You could have picked an offensive.
Well, Hightower was there, but I would have given it to Gilmore.
Offensive linemen, too. I mean, like, they were winning their matchups on the line, Damian.
Well, listen, you could absolutely pick a defensive player. I look at more so the scheme that the Patriots were running defensively, where they were running all those games and twists with those guys up front. They had the Rams offensive line just baffled up front. So I think it might be a little bit harder to single out one guy because so many of those guys were winning their battles. But
and to be quite frank with you, you know, over the course of the game, I was trying to dig into my donuts, and I had honey buns on the left side. I had glazed donuts on the right side. So I missed part of the first half. So, you know, you guys got to help me out.
If we're going to pick the MVP, obviously people are going to look at the one guy who was constantly impacting the game, and that would be Julian Edelman.
Yeah. I'm with Max. I think it should have been Bill Belichick if that was available as an option.
Staff.
I'd have given it to Bill Belichick.
That was his most impressive. I think that was his most impressive coaching job in a Super Bowl thus far. Damian will be.
Well, as a head coach, maybe as a head coach, but as a defensive coordinator, without a doubt, it was his performance of stopping that K-gun offense in 1990. I'll never forget it. To this day, that's the greatest Super Bowl that I've ever seen. And they actually played in the regular season. The Giants and Bills had, and I believe that the Bills beat them in that regular season game. The Giants only lost 3 games that whole regular season. I remember they lost to the Eagles. I think they lost to the 49ers, and I think they lost to the Buffalo Bills. But one of you brothers can check up on that. But when they met in the Super Bowl, that was the best event Super Bowl I can ever remember watching. And that was, of course, where Whitney Houston sang the national anthem prior to the game. The greatest singing performance of the national anthem by far. Well, I shouldn't say by far. I don't want to sound like Max Kellerman with the hyperbole, because Marvin Gaye's performance at the 1983 All-Star Game, that's right there as well. But anyway, that's basically it on that. Congratulations to Julian Edelman. He did have a great performance in that game. And the 6 degrees of separation from Jay Rice is a bit eerie, to be quite frank with you. I mean, what are the chances of that? That the best wide receiver in the history of the playoffs and the second best wide receiver in the history of the playoffs would have such a connection years before that second receiver was even in the NFL. It is what it is. Peace.